Savannah's mom was last seen at her home around 9:45 p.m. Saturday night. The next morning, she did not attend her usual church service, and that's when churchgoers sounded the alarm to family members.
Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old, and she has been inside her daughter's mansion. What she found there wasn't a scandal. It was a small, worn Bible sitting in the corner of a $7 million estate, and it carries the weight of a loss that cracked this family open when Savannah was just 16 years old. That Bible is the most valuable thing in the house, and once you understand why, you will never see Savannah Guthrie the same way again. The story the tabloids told was wrong. The real one is far more extraordinary. Stay with this.
Nearly 50 days now since Savannah Guthrie's mother disappeared. That suspected abduction remains unsolved tonight. But we've learned investigators have recovered additional images from Nancy Guthrie's surveillance cameras.
What was actually hidden in the mansion. Savannah Guthrie has two homes. There is a Tribeca loft in Manhattan. High ceilings, expansive glass, the kind of address that costs what most American families earn across an entire decade. And then there is the upstate New York retreat, a sprawling white clapboard farmhouse on more than 20 acres of Hudson Valley land. $7 million in real estate. Impressive on paper. The kind of property that generates a certain kind of headline. Nancy walked through those doors and noticed none of that first. What she noticed was mud, small boots by the front entrance caked in dirt from the fields. Savannah's kids, Vale and Charles, running through open land with zero concern for what they tracked inside. Half-finished art projects colonizing the dining table. The smell of fresh coffee and something baking in the kitchen. Porches built wide and low, designed for the kind of conversation that stretches past the point when anyone meant to stop. For Nancy, none of that was disorienting. None of it was surprising. It was familiar. It was Tucson, just with considerably better square footage. But here is the detail that reframes the entire story. The most valuable object in that mansion is not the chef's kitchen. It is not the pool that mirrors the open sky above the Hudson Valley. It is a small, worn Bible sitting in the corner of the room, soft at the spine, marked. Throughout with decades of handwritten notation, read so many times the cover has gone supple at the edges. A Bible that has been in their family since before Savannah was famous, before she was a lawyer, before she was anything other than a teenage girl in Tucson, whose father had just died and whose world had just been rearranged without permission. That Bible is where this story begins. And understanding what it means requires going back to the afternoon that changed the Guthrie family forever. The empty chair in Tucson. Savannah grew up under Arizona skies so wide, they made you feel simultaneously small and limitless.
Because when people ask me, where are you from? I'm always proud when I say Tucson, Arizona. I grew up there, went to college there, my mom still lives there.
Nancy ran the household like a laboratory for ideas. The dinner table was an arena. You came ready to discuss, to argue, to defend a position with actual evidence behind it. Debate was the family language. Intellectual honesty was the standard. Nancy believed it deeply. A child who learns to think clearly at home can handle almost anything the world eventually puts in front of them. And Tucson put plenty in front of them. Savannah's father, Charles, died suddenly when she was 16 years old. No warning. An ordinary afternoon that stopped being ordinary and never returned to what it was. For a teenager already wired for intensity, already developing the sharp, analytical, relentless mind that would later make her one of the most effective interviewers on American television, this was not just devastating, it was foundational, the kind of rupture that either breaks a person or restructures them entirely. Grief at 16 has a specific gravity. It can become the permanent explanation for every failure, every dream that gets quietly set down, every version of yourself that never quite gets attempted. Most people who experience that kind of loss at that age carry it as an interruption, something that derailed the story before it could really begin. Savannah did not let that happen, and the reason is Nancy. Guthrie did not let grief become the household's permanent address. She kept the family moving. She kept Charles present. His photographs stayed on the walls, his name stayed in the conversation, his memory was spoken about rather than quietly buried to keep things comfortable. She kept faith at the center of daily life, not as a performance, not as a public declaration of resilience, as a genuine structural anchor, something real to stand on when the ground felt unstable and everything else was being renegotiated. and she planted something in Savannah that would not become fully visible to the outside world for years. The understanding that time is finite, that a voice is a gift, not a guarantee, that the correct response to loss is not to slow down, but to become more deliberate about every hour that remains. After her father died, Savannah's work ethic changed. The drive was already there. Nancy recognized it early, the way a parent can see potential before the world, has any idea it exists. But after Charles was gone, the drive sharpened into something different, something harder. She stopped coasting on ability and started treating every skill she had as something that needed to be built and rebuilt deliberately, because she understood at 16 what most people only learn much later, that nothing is permanent and everything worth having has to be earned while you still have the time to earn it. She carried that understanding out of Tucson and into every version of her life that came after. Quietly, internally, the way a root system operates, invisible at the surface, but the reason the tree does not fall when the storm arrives.
To be God. You want it to be, but Annie was. Even worse, you were like a poser.
I was a poser.
He was a preppy poser.
I was.
The other thing Tucson gave her was an allergy to pretension. The desert is not a place that rewards performance. It rewards showing up and doing the work. Savannah's early years in local news, unglamorous markets, modest pay, the grinding repetition of daily broadcasts where nobody outside a small regional audience is watching, fit the same template. Nancy was there for all of it, watching her daughter work corners of the industry that offered no guarantees and no shortcuts, developing instincts that a person simply cannot acquire any other way. What Savannah was building during those early years was not a career. It was a foundation. She was accumulating the kind of competence that only comes from doing something imperfectly, repeatedly, until the imperfections start to disappear. Nancy recognized this as the same process she had tried to instill at the dinner table in Tucson. The idea that understanding something takes longer than it looks, that the early years of doing anything are supposed to be uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not a sign that you are in the wrong place. She was in exactly the right place. She just did not know yet how far it was going to take her. If you want more stories like this, the kind the tabloid headlines bury, subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. The pivot nobody saw coming. Here is where the story gets complicated in the best possible way. Savannah Guthrie did not take the straight line from ambitious kid to national television. She took a detour, one that looked, from the outside, like it might cost her everything she had already built. A detour that confused people who thought they understood what kind of career she was building. After grinding through local news markets in Missouri and Arizona, learning the craft from the absolute bottom, developing the instincts that only come from years of repetition and live television, and making mistakes on air, and doing it all again the next morning, she made a decision that caught nearly everyone off guard. She left journalism. She enrolled in law school, not just any program, Georgetown University Law Center, one of the most demanding and competitive legal institutions in the country. People did not know what to make of it. Local television reporters do not typically do this. They do not stop mid-career and walk into a pressure cooker law school at the age when their peers are finally getting comfortable in their careers. It is not the safe move. It is not the obvious move. Nancy supported the decision without hesitation. Her philosophy had always been that a woman should have as many tools in her belt as possible, that breadth creates depth, that knowing more things makes you better at the core thing, not worse. Savannah absorbed that philosophy completely and walked it straight into one of the most rigorous academic environments in the country. At Georgetown, she was not the polished, warm television presence that America would later come to know on Today. She was a focused, relentless scholar, operating completely outside her comfort zone and genuinely thriving in it. She graduated magna cum laude. She was in the library past midnight. She ran on coffee and the same fundamental drive that Nancy had, built into the household back in Tucson. The one that says adequate is not the standard, excellent is the standard, and there is a meaningful difference between those two things that shows up in everything you produce. After graduation, she did not run immediately back to journalism. She took a position at a law firm specializing in white-collar criminal defense. For a moment, a real moment, it appeared that the legal world had fully absorbed her. Like the television career was behind her, like that chapter was closed. Then she found her way to court TV as a legal correspondent, and something clicked that had never quite clicked before. The two versions of Savannah Guthrie that had been developing in parallel finally merged. She could break down the most complex and consequential criminal trials in the country with the authority of someone who had actually studied and practiced law, delivered with the communicative precision of someone who had spent years figuring out how to make complicated events legible to a general audience. This was the missing piece. Nancy says this was the moment Savannah truly found her lane, not just reporting the news, explaining the world. Those are two fundamentally different jobs, and most people who do, one cannot do the other. The response was immediate. Audiences trusted her in a way they had not quite trusted legal commentary before, because what she was offering was not opinion dressed as analysis. It was the real thing. She knew the material from the inside. She had read the briefs. She had sat in law school lectures and worked cases at a firm and understood the machinery of the legal system, not as an observer, but as a practitioner. That credibility comes through on screen whether a viewer can articulate it or not. They feel the difference between someone performing expertise and someone who actually has it. Nancy watched all of it from the beginning. She was not surprised. And get this, that law degree is not a footnote in her biography. It is the engine under everything you watch on screen. When Savannah sits across from a politician who is being evasive, or a powerful executive who keeps trying to redirect the conversation away from the question that was actually asked, she is not working from a list of prepared questions and hoping one of them lands. She is running a cross-examination. She knows how to track an inconsistency through a long, circuitous answer and bring it back to the specific moment of contradiction. She knows how to hold a thread through evasion and make someone answer what they were actually asked, rather than what they preferred to be asked. That is not a journalism skill. That is a courtroom skill. She is one of the very few morning anchors in American television who genuinely possesses it, and it came from a decision that looked, at the time, like it might be a mistake. What Nancy sees. By 2012, Savannah Guthrie was the co-anchor of Today. By any external measure, she had arrived. But the version of that story most people carry, the polished anchor, the designer wardrobe, the smooth, unflappable surface, accounts for almost none of what actually happened to get her there. She buried her father at 16. She rebuilt herself in the Arizona desert under Nancy's steady direction. She walked away from a journalism career at its peak to earn a law degree nobody saw coming. She worked a law firm floor. She spent years making criminal law comprehensible for national audiences. She covered the White House. She asked hard questions of the most powerful people in the country, in the most visible rooms in the world. None of it shows on the surface. None of it is supposed to. Nancy Guthrie did not raise a woman who wears her history visibly. She raised a woman who converts it into fuel and keeps moving. When Nancy walks through the doors of the upstate farmhouse or the Tribeca loft, she sees all of it. She sees it in the wide, bright communal spaces, rooms designed for people to actually be in the same place at the same time, rather than dispersing into separate corners. She sees it in Charles's photographs, displayed prominently enough to make clear that forgetting was never on the table in this household. She sees it in the bookshelves, law journals alongside children's books, alongside spiritual texts, dog-eared and soft-spined, read far too many times to be decorative. She sees the same household she built in Tucson, reconstructed at a larger scale. In the city, the loft runs like a command center. Savannah's alarm goes off at 3 in the morning. Folders and notes and research materials are organized and cross-referenced for every single broadcast. Nancy sees the discipline in the physical arrangement of that space. She sees a woman who never confused having a platform with being allowed to be unprepared. There is a particular type of discipline that only develops in people who were taught early that the work is the point, not the recognition the work brings, not the position it earns you, but the work itself, done at the highest standard you are capable of, every single time. Savannah absorbed that from Nancy, and Nancy sees it operating in every room of both homes. She also sees what the outside world misses entirely. She sees a woman who is genuinely, deliberately, stubbornly happy, not the performed contentment of someone who has achieved a lot and wants to project gratitude. The real version, a person who worked extraordinarily hard, lost things that mattered, rebuilt herself multiple times, and arrived at a life that actually reflects what she values. That is rare. It is rarer still in the specific high-pressure environment of national morning television, where the incentives constantly push toward the polished surface at the expense of the interior. Savannah chose the interior. Nancy made sure she would. And yet, even inside that high-pressure urban environment, what Nancy actually found was the deliberate preservation of ordinary life. Meals that run long, weekly routines that anchor the chaos, the specific comfortable disorder that only exists in a house where children feel safe enough to actually make a mess. The Bible in the corner. Here is what it all comes back to. In the corner of Savannah Guthrie's multi-million-dollar estate sits a small, worn Bible, soft at the edges, marked throughout with decades of personal notation. Not a decoration, not a prop, a daily instrument. And according to Nancy, the most valuable thing in the house, not for what it cost to purchase, but for what it cost to become necessary. Savannah has spoken about her faith publicly, though carefully and without volume. She has mentioned praying before broadcasts. She has talked about the role her spiritual life plays in keeping her grounded through live television and breaking news and the specific unrelenting type of public visibility that never fully switches off. This is not branding. It is not a narrative strategy. It is simply how she operates. And it is, unmistakably, the direct continuation of what Nancy built in Tucson when Savannah was a teenager and the world had just become far more difficult than it had any right to be. But that Bible carries something beyond faith. It carries Charles. It carries the years when belief was not a comfort, but a necessity, the only structure holding a family upright while everything else was being rebuilt from scratch in the aftermath of a loss that arrived without warning. It carries the memory of an ordinary Arizona afternoon that restructured two lives permanently. It carries the specific invisible work Nancy did to ensure that grief did not become the final word. When Nancy sees that Bible sitting in the corner of her daughter's estate, she is not surprised. She put it there. Not literally, but in every way that actually counts. She is the reason it exists in that house at all. That is the secret that was hidden in the mansion. Not a vault, not a scandal, not the explosive revelation the tabloid headline was engineered to make you expect. Something quieter, something harder, something more permanent than any of that. The evidence that what a mother builds in a small desert house, the values, the faith, the absolute refusal to let grief have the final word, does not disappear when the address changes. It travels. It survives every reinvention life delivers. It survives loss at 16 and a law degree in your 30s, and the specific loneliness that comes with being the face millions of people feel they know while knowing almost nothing real about you. The mansion is not a departure from where Savannah Guthrie came from. It is the fullest possible expression of it. And for Nancy, at 84, stepping through those doors and finding the mud on the small boots by the entrance and the worn Bible in the corner and the photographs of Charles still on the wall, that is not a shocking revelation. That is a mother watching the seeds she planted in Arizona soil reach their full height. Subscribe for more stories like this one, and drop a comment below. Which part of Savannah's story did you have absolutely no idea about before you watched this? Because we have a feeling the answer is going to surprise you.